Good afternoon to you all. I know not everybody's come back from this rather short break, but let's make a start. I want to welcome you all to this session on how we all get better communities, connecting communities, and building stronger communities. And we've got an excellent group of speakers here, and I would like to ask them to come and sit down, please. So is George MacGinnis in the room?
No, he's outside.
He's outside. On a call. Okay. Well, but we've got one of our speakers, Iain Cassidy, who's the CEO of OpenAge, is going to join us virtually. I don't know if he's available to do that yet as we start the session, because he has COVID, so he wasn't able to come here today. And we also have we also have Andrew Goodacre, who's the CEO at British Independent Retailers. Do come up and take your seat, please. And Nicola Waterworth, and also Professor Julienne Meyer. Thank you very much indeed. I might need to start. I don't know if we start out of order. Can you manage slides if there are any? As George isn't here yet, and so. Let me ask, sorry, we're just wondering where the speaker is. Can I ask Andrew, would you like to start? So Andrew Goodacre is the CEO at British Independent Retailers Association, and he's devoted his career to strengthening Britain's high streets and the communities they support. I'm not going to give you long biographies because we want to hear the speakers. So over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Hi, well, good afternoon, everyone, and quick thank you to the ILC for giving me the chance and opportunity to speak to you today and to be part of this very important debate. I'm going to talk for a few minutes now about retail. I specialise in independent retail. There's about 260,000 independent retail shops across the UK. We're also members of the British Retail Consortium, which looks after the large retailers, the chain retailers. So I have good insight into their thinking and approach as well. Now, my interest in this area really dates back to September last year at a Conservative Party conference in Birmingham, where we're based. I met the ILC for the first time. I met Ailsa Forbes, who's done some excellent guides on retailing, healthy retailing, and made me aware of this opportunity. And it got me thinking about retail, it got me thinking about healthy aging and bringing those two opportunities together. Now, in many ways, from an independent retailer's perspective, they naturally see that opportunity by virtue of their location, often local retail businesses, working in local communities, supporting and servicing local communities, and often used by all members of the community, especially older ones. So we're well positioned to sort of say, well, yes, this is a good opportunity for us and we should be making more of that and being part of that stronger community. Then we have the larger retailers, and I look at what they do from the outside in. They tend to be based in those city centres. Although if you look at the supermarkets, there are lots of quick, fast stores, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Morrison's, they're all out there serving local communities as well. And they have a different approach, I would argue. And I think a lot of it is about the way they approach loyalty and customer value. And from their perspective with their branding, whether it's a particular brand of a product or a brand of a retail unit, they talk about lifetime value and lifetime loyalty, and that begins at a much younger age. And so I think what we tend to see, and what I hear, when I get sent a lot of information on by people who think they can help my industry and my association, is talking about the Gen Z population, this younger population. And if you engage them at an early age, if you engage those people, if you drive them to your business and create that loyalty, then there's a longer, more valuable lifetime value from those people. And that's what they really focus on. That's why large retailers, I think, do miss out on this opportunity, because their marketing, their focus tends to be on younger generations, tends to be on technology, making their business more productive, or claiming to make it more productive, and therefore missing maybe an opportunity because retired people or even people who are my age, and I've just turned 60, are not quite as attractive or not quite got the length of value that a younger person might have. And that is part of the reason why retail misses this opportunity within its sector. There's also, importantly, I think, to remember as well, that in terms of supporting communities, retail play is a stakeholder in it. Hospitality is a stakeholder. Businesses on high streets are stakeholders. But there's another very important stakeholder, and that is the people who control, who manage the place, the realm, and that's the local authority, local council. And here we have a challenge, I believe, because all too often during my tenure at British Independent Retailers, we've seen schemes implemented locally that make accessibility harder for people, not easier. That make accessibility more challenging. They go, the drive for net zero and creating greener spaces in our towns and high streets, which is very laudable and very, very important to us. It's often at the expense of cars being used, and it's often removing car parking spaces, very rarely adding to them. It often makes that accessibility a bit harder without necessarily backing it up with a stronger infrastructure to bring people in and out of places. Now, if you make it harder for people to get in, and if you assume that everyone can ride a bike and we're happy to ride the bikes in and out, then you are excluding quite a large part of the population and may want to be part of that community. And I think there's a real challenge here that across the UK, quite often we see plans being made with future generations in mind, not necessarily the current generations in mind. And that is a challenge there. And I think Nicola will talk about good things are done in Manchester, and I think there are good examples of what's been done around the UK. And pedestrianisation is important, but it's not the silver bullet, and every place requires its own unique solution. All too often we see sort of broad brush policies put in there, the net result being they're just harder to use. And that just excludes too many people from that. So we would like to see more done in that area, and we work hard trying to influence government, national government and local government policymakers to think about the community, think about what it needs to be supported, because retail needs communities, communities need retail. And together they're stronger, make stronger communities and stronger local economies in the longer term. But they seem to be wedged, there's a wedge being developed between them, and that's not great for that. And without accessibility, without customers coming in who want to come in, retailers can't support the community because they haven't got the finance to do so. So we have to be aware of this, have to make that happen. And the retailers will see the opportunity of the healthy ageing population. It's £267 million a month they're missing out on. Retailers will soon wake up to that opportunity. But we need to have these more open, more transparent conversations coming through, and we need a stronger educational programme, commercial education, not just children education, to encourage business owners to buy into this as well, with the support of local authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And I'm very impressed with the amount of retailers who are doing dementia training for their staff. I think that's a really good initiative. So I'd now like to welcome George MacGinnis, who's Challenge Director for Healthy Ageing UK Research and Innovation. And George leads the 98 million Healthy Ageing Challenge, which is a research and innovation programme supporting UK government's Ageing Society Grand Challenge, to try and help us all get that extra 5 years of a healthy life. Thank you, George.
Jana, thank you very much. And apologies, it's just proof that there is life in government and some interest in healthy ageing, which is why I was late. And I was sort of reflecting on something that David said this morning when he sort of referred to sort of grand challenges morphing into a challenge. In fact, we were meant to be two different things, grand challenge being much, very much across government. And it made me think this morning, in the rush to sort of drop the grand challenge and get out the door, was this the one bit that couldn't be cancelled? No one dared, or was it just that someone forgot to turn the lights out on their way out? So I don't know. But I think we benefited from that. I think I've got a slide, if it's there, just a sort of picture to remind me that this is about better places and better futures. I'll go for the next one. Should be no writing on it, so there's nothing to read. And, we all through today, actually, it's really come out. So it's not just about the rational view of, unused bedrooms in houses and all the rest of it. We've got to think about the really human implications of the choices that are being made. So the desire to age in place, or at least be able to continue to connect with the community so thinking differently about encouraging occupancy is really welcome, actually. How do you stay where you are? The value of being able to bring generations together at a place level, and the role that new multi-generational community hubs, whatever that really means, and I think that would be for debate, could play in extending what we already know works, like what happens when you bring older people and nursery school children together. And the value of connecting through work, a sense of purpose and financial security, but also then understanding the fears that people have. Are my skills still relevant? Lord Blunkett was sort of talking about that with the steel workers retiring. Am I physically up to the job? The managers, they're like policemen. They're getting younger by the day. All those sorts of things. And I think with the right mix of occupational health and learning, new hubs, as envisaged in the report, could make a big difference, as would much better recognition of the need to improve how we look after employees who are also carers. So there's a lot, I think, that is to applaud in the report. And I'm not sure some of these things are as bold as the report implies. I think they're more vital. So when we set out in 2019, we said that our ambition was to impact the lives of millions within a decade. And we recognised that actually £98 million is quite a small amount of money in that respect. And in reality, we would only be able to act as a catalyst. So 4 years and 240 different investments later, how have we done? And I think we can be proud of some of the things that our innovators have been achieving. And I'm delighted Stephen was on stage just before, one of the Stephens, I should say. Stephen McPeak, he's there. Ros has also been helping us interview people and make sure that we keep the social gradient of where we're investing in mind. So we're actually trying to impact the lives of real people. But the sort of things that have come out, everything from flexible housing designs to support aging in place, opportunities to adapt housing to get more value from unused rooms, so that's a lot of housing stuff. Innovations in placemaking to build a greater sense of community. Civic Dollars is just one of those examples. And opening up opportunities for work and volunteering in later life, and extending employee health services, particularly to smaller enterprises who wouldn't normally subscribe to a scheme or have that sort of thing on offer. And I think, of course, events have played their part, and more recently, actually, they put ageing back on the agenda in a way that I thought, in the depths of COVID, all the focus would be on basically young school and university leavers not having anywhere to go. But the lorry driver crisis suddenly preempted the talk of the big retire and its impact on GDP. And I really welcome the Chief Medicals Officer report this year on health in an ageing society. If you haven't caught sight of it, it's definitely worth it. I think, I don't know, but that it must be a clear signal that someone like Chris Whitty chooses health in an ageing society at this point to leave his legacy, knowing that there's going to be a general election within 12 months. Of all the topics that he's picked that. So there are glimmers of hope that it wasn't just that someone forgot to turn the lights out, that there is a genuine understanding and interest in where this is going. But there is a lot of unfinished business, and with that in mind, you'd expect me to welcome what David said about a healthy ageing challenge 2.0, to whatever we might happen to call it. But I'd say, reflecting on our experience over the last few years, there are some guiding principles that I think should be set out for the next step. And some of these actually really themes that have already come out throughout the morning. So firstly, and you'd expect me to say this, we must continue to learn, integrating research, including the critical role of understanding design and human behaviours to enhance the impact that businesses innovating in this space can have. I think we need to be pragmatic about how much can be achieved by business and private investment on its own. And that's a sort of message to Treasury, because certainly when I set off, there were huge ambitions that public funding should be matched by 3 or 4 times private investment. I think it's quite unrealistic. It should include, going forward, a place-based component, because we've never brought all our innovations together in one place to say, can all the things we do start to have that impact on a population, at a population level on healthy life expectancy. And as part of that, it must maintain a focus on reducing inequalities. And I think one of the things that we're really proud of is having broken out of the mould that Innovate UK normally funds deep tech that's got massive potential downstream, and have included supporting social ventures to scale up as part of the portfolio, as just one example of keeping an eye on how are these innovations impacting the lives of real people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. And then finally, we will need a renewed commitment across government, and that sponsorship is vital. And why do I say that? We could actually repeat what we've just done, and we get another really good range of innovators coming forward. But unless the conditions for the market that they're going to come into are created, unless there is money behind social prescribing, no one wants to actually develop a new social prescribing service. All of those sorts of things require that action right across government. And we set off sort of 6 years ago with hope of a longevity council chaired by Secretary of State and Andy Briggs, as was. It never met. It needs that sort of cross-government push that the report is talking about to make it happen. So a lot in there, I suppose, but thank you.
Thank you very much, George. That's I mean, you know, 240 different investments. That's fantastic. I hope they're all thriving and they're going to be able to continue beyond the period of their funding. Our next speaker is joining us virtually. I hope he's able to. And he is Iain Cassidy, who's the CEO at Open Age, which is a member-led charity that's focused on promoting positive ageing across its membership and beyond. At present, I understand it's just in 3 London authorities, but it's hoping to spread widely beyond that. So, Iain, are you there?
I am here, yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. So first of all, I should apologise. I may well be coughing the entire way through this. I've got some honey and lemon here, which I'm hoping will help me through. So my name's Iain Cassidy. I'm Chief Executive of a charity called Open Age. Oh, my slides don't appear to be working. There we go, yeah, called Open Age. So we are an older persons organisation based in North West London. We've got a membership of around about 4,000 older people, and we help to keep them healthier, happier, and crucially, having fun for longer. And we do that primarily through the provision of a really broad range of group interactive activities. So in any given week, generally we're delivering around about 400 different activities out of roughly 40 plus community venues, as well as our own 3 centres that we run. While the bulk of our activity is in person, for the purposes of this little kind of sort of 4 or 5 minute slot, I actually want to focus on online and the potential role for the online space in terms of building stronger communities for older people. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because of our experiences during lockdown. So obviously kind of older people meeting in poorly ventilated spaces, not a great model during COVID. So we, like everyone else, had to completely shut down. And we'd never done anything online before. So we decided to see what we could do. And really rather rapidly, we managed to develop a really large programme of online activities. So by that September, after the first lockdown, we were delivering 100 plus hours of fully interactive group activities online each week, regularly accessed by around about 500-600 of our members. So as far as I'm aware, I think it's the biggest online programme for older people by a charity in the UK. Was that our older members reported to us that some of the benefits that they were receiving from that online activity, some of the issues we were tackling, were really similar to those that we would expect to see in person. So issues such as tackling isolation and loneliness, issues such as increasing mental well-being and increasing physical activity, the real preventative stuff that helps people stay active and happier for longer. Creating a sense of community, a place for connections to be made and maintained, for fun to be had, for that meaningful activity that makes life all the more worth living. So much so, and you can see some quotes up there of some of the older people that took part of our online activity during lockdown. But so much so that actually even now we're still delivering 30 hours of online activities each week, very much driven by the fact that that's what our members want and expect now. And we wanted to find out whether our experiences were the same as other older people's organisations or older people themselves. So with funding we secured from the National Lottery and Dunhill Medical Research, we went out and asked people, a whole load of different older people's groups, older people's charities and those organisations delivering services to older people. And the feedback was really, really clear. First off, worth saying, there is a group of older people who do not want to go online, do not like online, and never want to go online. And that's fine, that's not a problem at all. But there is a large group of older people who either already expect it, really think it's a good idea, or crucially think at some point in the future it's a sort of service that they would expect or want to have. Groups such as older carers who, for whatever reason, might find it quite difficult to engage in services because of the caring responsibilities that they've got. Those who might have health or mobility issues, so they can't leave the home. We spoke to a whole load of people in rural areas as well that either might not have a large offering where they are, or because of transportation issues, they can't get out and access them. And a really large group who just wanted to fit more in, and I think it really points to that idea of meaningful activity and fun that came out in the white paper, that's saying, actually, we want to do more with our life, we want to have fun, we want to fit stuff in. Again, you can see some quotes from the older people we spoke to in our research there. And I think the thing that really comes through for me is pretty much all of them touch on that idea of building social connections, which I think some people would say isn't what you would expect from online services for older people. I just want to end by saying categorically, I'm not saying I think online is the answer, and I would 100% support the recommendations in the paper around about funding spaces for connections made in person, in real life. But I really do think more thought and research needs to go into the designing and development of online spaces for older people. And with that in mind, I'm delighted to reference the Scaling Social Ventures Fund that George just mentioned. OpenAge secured significant funding from that to really work with older people and older people's groups to design and develop and really scale up that online service that we did during lockdown, and we'll be looking to launch a brand new service, OpenAge Online, at the beginning of next year. And I'll end in a blatant plug. If anyone within the audience is interested in finding out more about that or working with us, then please do get in contact afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iain, and I hope you recover very quickly from your COVID. I'd now like to invite Nicola Waterworth, who's Strategic Programme Lead Ageing in Place at the Greater Manchester's Ageing Hub, and she leads the Ageing in Place Pathfinder. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today. I'm going to, maybe unusually, start with a bit of poetry. So, our places and spaces, welcoming and safe, will feel relaxed, inclusive and happy. There'll be no need to be brave, social, active, participatory. Places to be me, spaces to be free. With intergenerational connection, respects, giggle and laughter, we will be rebellious, unshackled. Run wild, play and hang out, enjoy joyful ways to get about. No need to be responsible, to be home before dark. We'll go wherever, whenever, wearing what we want, hanging out in the park. Dancing on the pews, singing in the loos, music with our brews, so many fun things for us to do. We've a long history to unpick, messages to unstick, joyful boxes to tick, to create places and spaces to be proud, visible, out loud, places and community and unity. This poem was created by older residents who are engaged in our Ageing in Place Pathfinder programme in Greater Manchester. They came together to talk about what feeling safe and welcome in public spaces meant to them. And I bring that to share with you today because that's really what I want to focus on, is how we bring the voices of older residents into the discussion about how we create places that are aspirational, social and multi-generational. That's really what the focus of our Ageing in Place Pathfinder in Greater Manchester is about. It's ensuring that their voice, lived experience and leadership sits at the heart of how we can rebuild or build the social infrastructure for strong and supportive neighbourhoods. I'm going to take a slight deviation about place. When I talk about place or neighbourhoods, our neighbourhoods are about 10 to 20,000 population. I go to many events these days where we're talking about place-based policy making, and people are talking about city regions or kind of whole local authorities. So it's a very local, neighbourhood-based approach that we're taking. And I think, having read the report and heard all the things today, so I wrote many things before I came, which I've now kind of thrown out. Just a few observations from me about how we can make sure that that voice and lived-in experience sits at the heart of creating great places, based on what we've learned as well in the Pathfinder work that we're doing. I mean, I think, firstly, which may sound kind of obvious, we have to go to our older residents. So I mean both physically, but also when we did the work with older people about safe places, we didn't go in and say, we'd like to co-design a safe place, please. We asked them what it was like to live where they live. What would they like to be better, and how would they like to work together to do that? So they set the agenda for that conversation. Secondly, we feel very strongly about building on the strengths of individuals, of local organisations, of local communities to design those places. I think that's how you develop the strong partnerships that have already been referenced with businesses and with the local authority, to build on that local knowledge and history in the place. The work requires long-term, trusted relationships. That's not easy, and it can take a lot of time. For many of our communities, and particularly when we think about inclusion and those that are most marginalised, there's a very difficulty in trusting lots of people to come into their spaces and have those conversations. I think I'm in my 40s now, so that's near it's a long time in policy making. I get deja vu sometimes with policy ideas. Some of these communities have heard it before when you come in and talk to them. So you have to build trust to work with them, to really hear their voices in creating change. And I think that speaks to a really important point about it takes new skills, behaviours and culture to listen and engage with people and to do it well. I think what we're hoping to do in Greater Manchester is really invest in our workforce to do that, but also invest in our residents, their skills as leaders, their skills as storytellers, their skills as the people in those communities who will help make a difference. Because some of this work will require some difficult conversations and some difficult stories to be told, and I think that takes a real skill to do. I think one of our greatest assets in Greater Manchester is the skills of our engagement workers who are working with those communities day in, day out, and engaging them in our work. Which does slightly bring me back to the poetry, because I think one of the most powerful tools that I think we have in our toolbox in Greater Manchester, and those of you who are familiar with the work that we've been doing as an ageing hub, and before that in Manchester, may be aware, is our relationship with our cultural and creative sector. I've shared poetry today. I could have shared a film. Similarly, I could have shared details about the micro-residencies that we did with visual artists, all of themselves over 50. Different ways to have conversations, to engage people in the discussion, to help design the places and the things that people need for that social infrastructure to function. We've been experimenting a little bit, and I hope to do more around using creative engagement around intergenerational climate dialogue, and I feel like it helps us to have those quite difficult sometimes conversations. So I think those are some of the things I would say about bringing voice and lived experience to the table to inform our work. I did have a few observations about kind of the multi-generational hubs idea particularly, because I think it's something that we spend a lot of time in our Pathfinder areas talking about. The intergenerational dialogue is absolutely essential in places, and residents tell us that they want to be part of that work. They talk to us about wanting to build relationships with younger people and to build connection and to understand their lives. I think we need to exercise a bit of caution about what a hub is. I'm hoping that it's not one single shiny building in a place that actually turns out to be too far away from where most people actually are. Even in quite small neighbourhoods, most residents tell us that their hub is a different space than somebody else's, and probably on a different day, it's a different place again. And then I think also, and I don't know if it's the right metaphors, but I'm going to try it anyway, picking up on the food theme from earlier, I think it's really important that those spaces are kind of salads, not soups. So they become spaces where lots of people can go, and there's still space for younger people to meet as younger people. There's still space for older people to do that, but they are genuinely places where we can get that multi-generational dialogue. So yeah, thank you.
And lastly, but by no means least, we have Professor Julienne Meyer, who is the CBE. She's the chair of the Older Persons Housing Task Force, which is currently considering a raft of information on how we improve housing, the range of housing options for older people. And she's also Professor Emeritus of Nursing Care for Older People at City University of London and lots of other visiting professorships. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation to talk about the task force today. Having looked at the white paper, I was really delighted to see the focus on multi-generational communities, on good housing, and speaking personally, toilets and seats. The task force is very focused. We're halfway through, so it's a 12-month piece of work, and we're 6-7 months in. And we're interested in how can we support people to stay in their own homes for as long as possible if that's what they want. How can we enable people to right size in order to release family homes if that's what they want. And how can we expand the quality and quantity of the specialised older people's housing. And we're focused on lower to middle market, which is the largest market and has previously been largely ignored. And we describe that in terms of people who perhaps own their own homes but have little access to cash, or indeed perhaps are renting and have a small pension. So we're looking at, yes, the ageing population and the fact that 90% live in mainstream housing that's not always age appropriate, whereas only 6% live in specialised older people's housing, which is, by international comparisons, much less than elsewhere. It is estimated that 1 in 4 of all new homes should be targeted for older people to cope with changing demographics. And that actually we should be building 50,000 new specialist older people's housing units, whereas we are actually only building 7,000. The existing stock is largely unsuitable. Only 9% has all 4 of the accessibility features for visiting. And the situation is only going to get worse. As we've heard recently, if not before, that growing older people private renting is set to double in the next 20 years, with 30% in non-decent homes. And many people who are currently renting will not be able to afford their rent in retirement. And as you all know, 1 in 5 people live in poverty. So the task force is broken down into 3 groups: people, products and place, people looking at what it is older people want and what they can afford, with the products looking at, what does good aged dementia-friendly housing looks like and what are the financial products that are needed. And the places work stream is looking at the levers. How can we bring people together in local systems to make change happen? So we're engaged in a lot of work at the moment. We've got our current thinking that's been synthesised into an interim report that we're presenting to the new minister and to Helen Whately. This is a Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities partnership with the Department of Health and Social Care. And we're presenting our interim report, and then we're going to be in the next half testing out our recommendations by interrogating them with further research and evidence gathering through roundtables with various stakeholders, focus groups with older people. We've conducted 5 surveys, and we will be doing 12 roundtables. And alongside that, lots of site visits and talking and having strategic conversations with various leaders. So in terms of what we're thinking about, we're very much focused on having a people-centred approach. And so we're interested in knowing how can we take a people-centred approach to address older people's housing needs. And underneath that, because that is the bedrock, we are looking at empowering older people and their families to access the housing that they want. How can we build public trust by strengthening consumer protection? How can we ensure that people access timely, trusted information, advice and support? And how can we heighten awareness and inspire older people and those working with them to actually think housing? We're interested in stimulating the new supply of homes and communities that support healthy ageing. So how can we enhance the viability of the private housing retirement sector? How can we create age and dementia-friendly design standards for all types of housing? How can we build age and dementia-friendly environments and communities as well as these homes? And we're also interested in national and local leadership to galvanise action and drive delivery. So we're interested in how can we transform national leadership? How can we drive action through local placemaking? And how can we create the strategic and coordinated approach to innovation, research and development in older people's housing? And I just want to end by saying that we're talking with the task force in the Netherlands who's doing a similar job, and they've already been working 3 years and they've got another 3 years to go. They're not expected in 1 year to come up with a set of recommendations that may or may not be acted on. They are working directly to government as the issues they encounter come up, trying to sort them out. But I'm fascinated by what they're doing because although they're wanting to build more quality and quantity of older people's housing, they're really recognising that the need to develop community. So that is a strong thread in their work because they believe that to meet the ageing needs of their population, people can't rely on the welfare state in the way that they have in the past. And actually, there are not going to be enough younger people. So if you really focus on communities, whatever the setting that you're living in, then people can keep a better eye out for each other. I think that's quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing the report and hopefully having an opportunity to engage in the discussion about how we take your recommendations forward. I think that's going to be really fascinating. We have, unlike the earlier sessions, we've actually got a bit of time for questions because Margaret Hodge wasn't able to join us this afternoon. So I see the first question, and I'll take a couple at a time, and then I'll ask the panel just respond to the ones that you wish to. I think we'll do it that way.
Chris Jeffrey, Men in the Gap. This is mostly a question for Andrew. As a former trustee of a local shop mobility organised charity, do you think that the local government, local council funding cuts are short-sighted in how they affect disabled people getting access to retail, etc.?
I don't think it helps, for sure. You know, I think local authorities, we know are challenged in terms of their funding. And you know, everyone is a priority, I guess, in that way as well. I think what we tend to see too often, I think, are that there's not enough thought given to the intergenerational needs of a high street, you know, in terms of the way it's developed. And sure enough, you know, not everyone wants to go in by car or wants to go in by bus. Some people want to cycle, some people want those pedestrianised areas, and it's finding the right balance between all of it. But all too often, I think that the older population are not at the forefront of thinking. I think that's the challenge, really. Now, I say that's the challenge for retailers as well, large and small, is that we're all too conditioned to think about a younger generation as opposed to an older generation in terms of potential. And I think we do need to open our eyes to the opportunity that making small but meaningful adjustments for older customers who are physically challenged or mentally challenged is really important.
Thank you. And we have a question here.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Alison Benzimra from United St. Saviour's Charity. We've just opened up, we're a housing provider in London, and we've just opened a new housing scheme which has a community centre and a community kitchen embedded in the building. So the aim is for it to be an asset to the wider community. We collaborating with Bournemouth University, and we've just completed pilot projects for a community-based food model. So, Nicola, this is a question for you. What's been really interesting is the importance of transport and toilets. And so, as we move on to the next stage of the project, one is ensuring that not only are we having activities inside the scheme, but we're getting people outside. So one is ensuring that it's accessible to people that don't live in the building to get to the site. But when we're taking people out, we constantly need to be thinking of accessibility in terms of transport, but also ensuring that there are toilets when we get to the final destination. What has your experience been working in Manchester around those issues?
Yeah, well, toilets are always the key, aren't they? I think, I mean, so a number of our Pathfinder neighbourhoods have a similar idea where either an extra care or some other kind of specialist housing scheme is at the centre with a community cafe providing a hub, and that they face a number of different challenges. I think certainly one of the, I mean, I don't have any simple answers on the toilet front, so I'm sure that you weren't actually looking for those. I know that, you know, there are certainly some schemes that were started before COVID and then maybe fell off, and this might be one for kind of retail and hospitality around being able to use toilets within existing settings. I think they've gone a little bit off the agenda, and it might be worth revisiting some of those. I think the other, I mean, what we try to do is get our local authority colleagues from across departments involved in the Pathfinder, so that, you know, back to that voice point, really hearing the voice and what the impact of not being able to go out even for a very short walk locally means, including councillors, although I tend to find councillors are big advocates of toilets when those cuts are made. And just on the kind of walking and transport point, I think where we've had good kind of success in those is where we've started with some of the areas. They started with a hub, and then they work with residents to create local walks from that hub, and some really nice, which I can share with you, examples of kind of rediscovering places and spaces, and then getting investment in those green spaces. So they're actually quite localised, but they're getting out and they're really kind of driving what would a walk from here look like? What would the green space look like? Taking over spaces and greening them as well is going to be quite a thing next year, which I'm quite excited about.
Thank you. And we have a question over here. And if anybody else has, and then we have one at the back. Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is really a question on housing, Professor Meyer. As someone who is going through this downsizing exercise and recognising what a pain, absolute pain it is, whatever age, but particularly when you're getting older, the need for community support is critical. But could I add two things to your agenda if they're helpful? One is the whole notion of the housing chain. We're obsessed with the idea of building houses. Actually, it's the turnover of houses. And if you could release a lot of the older houses for something more suitable. And the second point really is the way that housing in this country works. It's all brick-based. It's all to a certain model. But if you looked at the prefabricated housing that exists in a lot of Europe, that can be designed easily to fit whatever needs you want and be well insulated, and it can be put up. I've seen it put up in Austria in a month. So there is a huge opportunity here to stop, to think out of the box about the type of housing, not in shape, but in the way it's put together, because they're perfectly adequate.
Thank you. That's not a question, that's a comment, and I'll take it away. Terrific.
We have a question at the back and then...
I have a question for George, and it comes from what Iain also mentioned in his presentation for Open Age. I'm Prenika, and I'm a researcher in digital health technologies at Oxford. And what I've found in my research is that while co-design is such an important element of making technologies and digital spaces effective for older adults, what happens with the funded projects, including the ones with UKRI, is that the evidence frameworks followed by research projects does not match the evidence frameworks required by commissioning agencies, including by NHS, for example, specifically for generalizability, applicability at systems level. So I would request George to comment on how this can be tackled and we minimize research wastage that happens as a result of this.
Thanks. And can I, Iain, you're still online, I think, so if you want to come in with any of these questions, you're very welcome to respond. George.
It's a question near and dear to my heart. That for me, there's nothing worse than research that ends up as shelfware and doesn't have an impact. And one of the things that we've been doing is working, Professor Judith Phillips is in the audience. She's my research director, part-time, full-time. She's Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research at Stirling University. How do we ensure that research has business impact? And so, you find me in a different context railing against trying to use randomized controlled trials to demonstrate service change that wraps things around with the bureaucracy that means you get nowhere, you often get a nil result. So I think there is something about taking the research community with you, but I think it also starts in the way that we did right at the start by defining what we expect from researchers. And I'm delighted that Ros is in the audience, because one of the commitments we made was to build in the views of people with lived experience right from the start. So how we design a competition, how we judge applications to the competition, and what we expect people to be doing once they get their funding downstream. So that lived experience should run right throughout there. Now, I'd be delighted if all 240 projects were successful, but I think with that sort of grounding, they stand a better chance of success than they would otherwise have got. And I would really appeal back to your research funders, and I'm guessing you're getting money from EPSRC or one of the other councils, to push back and say, we want impact from our research, and to get impact from that expenditure, we need to do things that actually make sense for the next stage of translation into business and implementation.
Thank you very much. And we'll take one last question, and possibly it's one that Iain could respond to, or we'll see.
Yes, thank you. Anna Dixon also was chair of the Reimagining Care Commission. There was also an Archbishop's Commission on Housing, which I don't know whether, Professor Meyer, you were aware of, which made recommendations, and we also made recommendations about the need for diverse housing options that were very much more embedded in the community, and that was true of both specialist settings for adults with disability as well as older adults. I just wondered, one of the sort of sticking points, I think, in the housing market are the finances, and Paul Johnson, who was here earlier, mentioned this specifically about the wealth that's sort of tied up in housing, and the sort of difference between this country and other countries in the sort of disincentives for people to move. And certainly when I was working with Nicola and others at the Centre for Ageing Better, there was work done on right-sizing and really understanding the sort of reasons why people don't move. So I wondered, as well as making recommendations in your older people's group, Professor Meyer, whether you will also be making recommendations about the finances and the incentives that need to go around this to enable people to right size into these homes that hopefully will get built. So it was less of a question, I'm sorry, for Iain, and more of a question for Julienne.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say that in terms of diversity of offer, that we also are looking at things like co-housing and shared lives and home share. That's an important part of it, although it's maybe harder to scale up in the same way. So in terms of finances, yes, in the products work stream, we've got Ben Rosewall, who works for Legal & General, and they in turn work with Inspired Villages, and he's from New Zealand, very expert in terms of the various financial products that might be needed going forward in terms of releasing capital from housing. Also, Andrew Surgener is in the Places work stream, and he works with CBRE and interfaces between investors and builders. So yes, it's very much on our agenda.
I was wondering actually more quick for government. I think it was about things like stamp duty. I think that was what Paul's point was.
Mm-hmm. Everything's being considered. Absolutely.
Great, thanks a lot. And I think George has a question for Iain.
So Iain, so I know this is about better places, but I actually wonder whether we should stretch our thinking a little bit. I'm really interested in your experience of non-geographic communities and the ability to bring them together online.
I think primarily that's one of the things that we're really interested with the project that we are developing with the Innovate UK funding. I think that for us, what we've discovered is that when people are coming online, they're not necessarily needing to have that relationship pre-existing, but actually once they can go online, they can develop the relationships, they can have that interaction about, oh, nice to see you again, or kind of, look where you're sitting today, the same types of interaction we have with Zoom, but then build a relationship with people after that. I think the other thing for us as well is that we wouldn't necessarily see an online service or online activities as being the end point. I think that what can happen if you're able to bring people from different communities and different places together is at the end of the opportunity to move that into the real world as well and start to build some of those relationships and some of those connections. Can I also just briefly mention one other thing, not related to the question, but it's just about intergeneration. I think a lot of people in their talks at the start talked about intergeneration. I know the report talks about intergenerational hubs as well. Again, 100% all for that. But I just think it's worthwhile flagging that intergeneration can mean a lot of things. And I do think it's important that particularly older people have spaces that belong to older people. They're often excluded from many other things. But I think it's really important that with any intergenerational hubs, we're still able to designate a time and a space that's for older people. But even within that, I mean, open age membership is 52 to 104. I would argue there's a hell of a lot of generations within that as well. And I think kind of you can still get that intergenerational and that kind of connection and resilience that comes from that, but not necessarily always having to be tots and grandparents.
Thank you, Iain. And thank you very, very much to my panel of speakers. And on to the next session. Thank you.